Hello, and welcome everyone to Editors Who Game Part 2. We're going to chat today with a few editors who enjoy games such as Dungeons and Dragons and other stuff. I'm Arley Sorg, co-editor-in-chief with Christy at Fantasy Magazine. Recently, Locus finalist, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm also senior editor at Locus Magazine, and I do a bunch of other stuff. So let's meet the editors. Everybody introduce yourself briefly. Let's start with Maurice.
Yeah, my name is Maurice Broaddus. I'm mostly known as a science fiction and fantasy author, and a little known secret, I am also the special editor over at Apex Magazine.
Little known, publicly available. But yeah.
Exactly.
Lawrence?
Hello, I am Lawrence Stewen. I'm the co-editor-in-chief at Augur Magazine along with Therese Mason-Peer. And yeah, Augur Magazine, we kind of just focus on publishing all sorts of speculative fiction and poetry and sometimes graphic fiction too.
And you guys also started Stone and Kettle, right?
Stone and Kettle?
Don't you have isn't that what I forget what it's called, but there's another
magazine. We do have a sister magazine called Tails and Feathers.
Tails and Feathers,
yeah.
Yes.
And that one is more focused on publishing sort of like slice of life or sort of more softer or quieter high fantasy in a sort of flash fiction format.
Nice. Scott?
I'm Scott H. Andrews. I'm the editor-in-chief and publisher of Beneath Ceaseless Skies, which is an online fantasy magazine. Been publishing for almost 14 years now. Specializes in fantasy set in secondary worlds, which I think many games are and gamers enjoy. And I've been playing D&D off and on since I was a kid, and I see interesting commonalities in it. Between it and editing, and I'm a laugh short story writer myself, so I see commonalities there too. I'm looking forward to our chat.
You also do science fantasy issues.
We do science fantasy issues every 2 years. Maurice was in one of those and has been in regular BCS. And of course, role-playing games, Eberron setting, those extend into a more science fantasy or laser gun and planet, I think some people call it. Sure.
Nice. And John?
Yeah, hi, I'm John Joseph Adams. I'm the editor of Lightspeed magazine and also the series editor of Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. I've edited, more than 30 anthologies, done a bunch of stuff like that. I had a novel imprint at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt for 5 years. And I love D&D. I love role-playing games in general, but D&D in particular. Also, recently I've also been editing D&D stuff for Kobold Press. I edited 2 adventure compilations for them, and also have dipped my toe in as a contributing game designer to one of their products, Tome of Heroes, which comes out soon. So yeah.
Nice. And Best American was also a Locus finalist.
Indeed it was, yes.
Yeah. And
currently is.
You just did a thing on Twitch too, right?
Did I? Oh yes, the thing yesterday. I guess it's on Twitch. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was just on Twitch yesterday with World Anvil, talking about world building and stuff. Part of the promotion for the. I just did this anthology called Kobold Guide to World Building, Volume 2. It was an essay anthology all about world building, and it's kind of like half game designers, half authors, and the idea being that you could learn the lessons whether you want it for role-playing games or for writing fiction. So
nice. All right, so let's get started. First question, but before we do the first question, and Scott's prepared for this, everybody roll for initiative.
Right.
Roll D20.
Right.
John had to deal with this last time. If you don't have any dice with you, you can do it on Google. Yep. You got a 13, and you want high. Scott's got a 13. Maurice has dice with him too?
I got a 9.
I had a 9.
You both got 9s. You got a 4. Okay, John, you're definitely last.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do Scott first, and then Maurice, and then Lawrence, and then John. Okay, so in college, I don't know about y'all, but we would occasionally have epic all-night sessions where we literally played well into the morning. Tell me about a memorable session maybe it was hours and hours, maybe it was just a session where you really got into the game, or where something awesome or interesting happened. But what was one of your most memorable sessions you've ever had, Scott?
I'll have to go with something a little more general. When I played as a kid, we could never really get a sustained game together because we were too young to drive cars. So we were dependent on somebody's parents to drive us around. But in recent years, I have DM'd one-shot short, 3-hour, 4-hour adventures on writers' retreats with writers, many of whom have not played D&D before or haven't seen it since they were kids. And
Right.
that is a lot of fun. Sometimes they know the ethos of role-playing games well. Like they're like, okay, which of these 3 enemies is the most wounded because we should dispatch them first, so they're definitely thinking in that mindset. I like more character-centered adventures in general rather than dungeon crawls, kind of like I like my short stories. So I always find it interesting watching the writers sort of puzzle through the interactions and the plot mysteries. And from a fiction sort of standpoint, looking at a lot of these one-shots, they're really a one-act play, or like a Twilight Zone episode. There's one turn, there's one thing that it all hinges on, and once you
Yeah.
figure that out, the story's over, because it's only 3 hours. You can't take much more time than that. And then there's usually a little bit of combat at the end. So I find that interesting too, watching how these writers interact with each other. And I have pre-rolled characters, and I just deal them out like a deck of cards. And sometimes they get all into it, like they make up a name for them and make up an accent and start, speaking in tongues and stuff. And that's always great fun. And I've had a number of people come out of those, fun after dinner quickie games at retreats, and then tell me 3 months later, I talked to some writers in my hometown, and one of them has DM before, and we've got our own game going now.
Nice. Yeah, those one shots are really good ways to like try out different character types too. Yeah, Maurice, what about you?
So I'm actually at StokerCon right now.
Oh,
and the reason I had my dice bag, my trusty Crown Royal dice bag with me, is because I may or may not be playing a series of Magic the Gathering with some of the guests here in a little bit. But that all ties into my story because I have a gaming circle, and the game we mostly played was Magic the Gathering, and we'd lose hours, if not days at a time, frankly, with some of our sessions. But we'd also role play together also. So if we had too many times of doing Magic in a row, it's like, oh, well, since we're getting together so often, we could role play while we're at it. And so I would always, not always, but I tended to become the default DM because I was the writer in the group, and they knew I would no matter what we were playing, because we mostly played either D&D or Palladium, which is basically the same thing. I know some people are going to riot at that sentence. Or Deadlands, the Weird Western game. And so I ended up being typically the default DM because they knew I'd go off script and everything. And so one of my favorite sessions, I'd let them roll up. I said, there are no character limits right now. You can do whatever you want.
Nice.
And because I knew the guys I was playing with, so I had a feeling where they would go. And so one of them built these twin characters. They were like these massively overpowered ogres, which weren't even supposed to use as a class. So their strength was ridiculous. They built one was a fighter, the other one was a wizard. So it was this really way OP characters that I let them create. And I'm like, no. And I said, here's the deal. It doesn't matter what you create. I'm going to write the game around what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter how OP you are. The game's not going to hinge on that.
Right.
And so you had these twin characters. There were a bunch of characters, but with them in particular, I had them in a scenario where the only way for them to get out of the scenario was to use some form of art. They were surrounded. They were, there's armies facing them down, and but the culture that they were in, they were like, if you can greet us in a proper way using art in some way, you can escape with your lives.
Nice.
And to watch them, I mean, it was like, we need a timeout. And then watch them go in the corner, start huddling and they were brainstorming hard. Then they come back, and then the wizard uses some of his spells to create wind effects to like twirl the other one around in midair and like launch fireworks behind him. And I was like use all these basic spells to like create all these massive effects for them to do this dance routine to. And I'm like, okay, this has made my everything right now. Y'all doing this. So that was probably my favorite gaming session.
That's awesome. It's funny how some DMs will be like, you can take a timeout and discuss, and some DMs will be like, the clock is ticking.
Right.
They're getting closer, like they do not play. Yeah. Hold on.
No, I wanted to see what they would come up with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hold on. Let me show you this.
He's going to show off his sneaker collection.
Magic the Gathering card.
Oh,
wow.
That I have not opened in like a decade or something like that, like a ridiculous long time. Yes. Lawrence, what about you?
Yeah, so I think like when you mentioned those like kind of college day D&D sessions, that kind of struck a chord with me, and it does bring me back to a session I had while I was in college. I was DM at the time. I'm usually the DM for whatever group I'm in, unless like I think I've only been a player, maybe like I can count that on like one hand. But most of the time I've been a DM. And for this particular group, sort of the setup of the adventure was that I just wanted to have a very classic setup where it was just like a small town with like a small dungeon nearby. And the adventuring party would kind of use the town as a base for resources, and they'd go out to the dungeon and go back and forth, that sort of thing. But the players kind of turn things around a bit, because this town was also run by a sort of militia group that were kind of like they weren't like evil, but they were kind of very strict and very authoritarian, and they were kind of taxing the people a lot. And they were also like taxing the players if they like found stuff in the dungeon.
Oh.
So the players decided that the major threat here wasn't the dungeon, it was the militia. So they decided to sort of like stage this almost like a rebellion. And in that particular session, they were kind of planning to raid this because they were taxing the people and they were taking the money somewhere. And the players decided, okay, they're taking this money on these boats. They're going downriver somewhere. We're going to raid one of their boats full of tax money, and we're gonna take the money and sort of be like Robin Hood, give it back to the people of the town. And it was just really fun to just watch them just strategize and plan out how they were going to execute this raid on this river, and how they were going to transport the money and all that. And they ended up doing all that, and it was a fantastic session. Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, a lot of those people, some of them, had some experience with D&D, but I think for the most part, they were pretty much brand new players. And I think that's often the case that I find, is that players with kind of no background experience with D&D kind of come into the game with a very fresh blank slate, and pretty much anything can happen with them.
Interesting. I think we'll come back to that soon. But yeah, John, what about you?
Well, since everybody else answered as a DM, I will too. So I had a group where so Christy, my wife, was in the group, and she eventually had to she just decided to stop gaming because it was like it was like for various reasons. Anyway, so we were trying to write her out of the campaign. And so I decided to give her like a little sort of goodbye session. We'd recently had this experience where like a neighbor was like trying to steal our cat, basically. And there was like a moment where the neighbors were and us were like in the street, and they were shouting at us, and so the woman who was like an older woman who lived there, and her husband, she was just like really nasty, and so we had sort of started thinking of her like as a harpy, I concocted this thing where like we were in water deep, and so we had the black staff, who's like powerful wizard in Waterdeep, and so we had her familiar get kidnapped, and her familiar was already sort of very similar to my cat. Like he was like a black cat, and he was. I mean, that's the extent of the similarity. But so he got kidnapped. So they go to rescue this cat, and they find this like harpy creature that had collected all these different familiars, and they have to save them all. And so they save them, but then also that cat's sister was one of our cats too, and she ran away. And so she's been this like missing cat and like this like hole in our hearts, because like she ran away and we don't know whatever happened to her. And so
Yeah.
I got to do like a little thing in there with that. So I brought that cat into it, and I made Christy cry, so that I felt like I did a good job.
In a good
But
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really memorable time.
Nice. So kind of going sort of back to what Lawrence said, I'm curious, do y'all feel like D&D is a game that, anybody could enjoy if you have the right game and the right people? It's a game for anybody? Or do you feel like this game appeals to particular types of people? Does it appeal more to creative types? Does it appeal more to logical types? Or like, what is your opinion about that? Anybody? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that basically anybody could enjoy a game like D&D or a different role-playing game. I mean, I think there's, depending on your personality type and how your brain works, there might be one role-playing game that's better for you than another. Like some people might be better off in a rules light system. Like I also play in a Monster of the Week game, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and that's very free flowing with like the rules being very much in the background, and you can kind of just like say what you want to do, and the GM can make it happen for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely appealing to a certain type of person. And I think games like D&D or even like Cypher, which kind of is billed as being rules light, but in practice I find like it's just as complicated as D&D. I think like certain people get bogged down in the rules, and then they just don't have fun. Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on like what is your tolerance for like taking turns in combat and that kind of thing, because like it can take a really long time, and like if your mind is just like wandering while that's happening, and like and you can't make sense of all of the all of the options before you, like I see like plenty of people wouldn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but I think in general anyone could. It's just a matter of like finding the right role-playing game that would appeal to your interests.
Yeah. D&D, like you can spend several sessions going through one combat scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do the rest of you think? You agree? You disagree? You have a slightly different take on it?
Yeah, I largely agree because like I mentioned my one gaming circle. Well, one of the guys in that gaming circle, was how he learned to play D&D was he was in the Navy, and they were on missions for like months at a time, and so
Wow.
they are down in submarines, and what are they doing? They're playing D&D. They could have these outrageous campaigns for months on end because and hours and hours on end because they were in this tube together. And so I think about that, and then I think about there's a group of teachers that I play with also. We also do a Monster of the Week.
Oh, okay.
Because it requires no advanced prep. We can just go in the moment and just go. And so both circles of friends that I play with, the game, and there's a variety of personalities. I mean, we're all outgoing personalities, but we all also really love story. And that's our big commonality. And so, you drop us in that scenario, and we all say from the beginning, the game is just an excuse for us to be together. So we set that sort of boundary too. It's like, no, the game is the excuse. The whole point is for us to enjoy this and enjoy our time together. Nice. We're just using this game as the vehicle.
Nice. What about you guys?
I think for me, again, because I like playing and gaming groups or sessions that are more character centered. I think it does take people who are willing to inhabit the character a bit, put themselves in the mindset. They don't have to necessarily do voices or get up and act it out, but And I think that may be why I end up playing with a lot of writers, because I think as writers and editors, we're used to that. Because I know some people who are really good at board games and strategy, but they're just not interested in inhabiting a character and trying to think, what would that character with this background and these flaws, what would they do in this situation? But for folks who are interested in that, I think there are all sorts of options, like John mentioned, rules heavy, rules light, groups that are more rule heavy or procedural, groups that are a little more loose on that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
What about you,
I
Lawrence?
I might have a slightly different take. I do think that, anyone and everyone can play D&D or games like D&D. I just from my personal experience, I feel like that there's kind of a change in quality depending on the makeup of the group. And if that group jives well together. It's sort of like a band of musicians coming together, and they all sort of like jamming out together. Depending on who's there, you could be producing really cool songs, or you could just be making noise. And
Yeah,
one is not necessarily worse than the other. Sometimes you just want to make noise and just like throw some stuff at the wall. But sometimes you want to really like a immersive quality experience, and I think it really depends on the group of people. From what I've experienced, most of the time I've had my best sessions with people I've known for a long time. And then I think some of the sessions that I didn't really jive with as well were ones where I've just kind of like, these are strangers I'm meeting for the first time. We're gonna play a one shot, never met them before. And yeah, some of those have been good, but they've been more of a mixed bag. Some of those have been like, eh.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it really depends on who you're playing with. That really determines the quality of the session.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I've done a couple one shots with Brandon, Brandon Crilly, the Canadian guy, Derek's friend. He's a writer. He does a bunch of one shots, and he pulls like people from the industry together to do them. But I'm very cognizant of the fact that like Brandon's niceness, his personality, he's kind of the glue that makes that one shot work. And if somebody with a different personality did that same one shot, it could be a total disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I mean, I think there's other things like I think what Lawrence is saying is a really good point. Like the composition of the group really does matter, how much fun it's going to be, and like for me, like I feel like the perfect group for me is like when everybody is interested in all the different elements of the game. So like just like D&D for instance. So like I'm really interested in the mechanics, but I'm just as interested in the role playing and all the other elements of inhabiting the character and playing everything. And so like when you have people who are really interested in the mechanics in the same game with people who are not, then there's like kind of a conflict between those two kinds of approaches to the game, and one may have more fun than the other as a result of it. I mean, I guess it depending on where the DM falls on the spectrum, so that can be difficult, like especially when like you're trying to get like add another person to like a game or pull some kind of group together. It's like, well, I know they like D&D, but I don't know what kind of D&D player they are. I don't know what they're into. Like, and it's like if I bring this person in, are they going to be like the odd one out and make it be not as fun for everybody? Or so it's it is complicated.
Yeah. Although I have to say, if you had asked me 2 hours ago if people on submarines play D&D, I would have been like, no way, no.
Yeah.
So I definitely had my assumptions shaken up today.
Yeah, I love that, by the way, and I hope they fought a lot of Saugen in their adventures on the submarine, because it just seems like it.
Nice. So it seems like this group we all end up DMing, which is interesting. I mean, we probably all play occasionally too, but we all DM. Because I feel like I've DM'd more than I've played, but I also really enjoy playing. So for you guys, what are like the top things you like about playing versus DMing? Like, because I know sometimes when I play, I'm sitting there thinking, God, I really need to like do another campaign again. I need to DM again. So where do you guys fall on this?
So I do like playing more than DMing, but I understand why I end up being put in the DM role, and one of them was me really annoying my DM at the time. Because I have a certain way that I play, which is about creating. The DM, it didn't take him long to realize he didn't have to create much of a story for me. I was going to jump into my own story, regardless of what he did. And so I remember there was this one time when we were stuck in a city, and I just kept, and it just seemed like I was just doing these random things. I'm like, I want to go do this random encounter here, and I want to do this random encounter here, and I want to talk to this family over here. And he didn't see what I was doing. And then by the end of the campaign, he realized, are you running this entire city right now? I'm like, yes, I literally built my criminal underworld right underneath your nose, networked all those relationships, and now all deals have to go through me. And he didn't see it coming. But then after that, he was just like, you're running the games from here on out.
Nice.
Well, I suppose I could draw the parallels between writing and editing. And, we're all editors here and many of us writers as well. So for me as a player, I think that's for me kind of like turning off the editor brain, but I think the experience as a player is different, especially in terms of plot, because of course you don't know what's around the next corner. Whereas as the DM, you're making all that happen. So as a DM, I can be surprised by players when they figure something out or when they misinterpret or interpret. I won't say misinterpret, when they interpret something completely differently than I expected. And then I have to make that not be a misinterpretation. I have to draw the map underneath their feet as they wander off, in a direction that I didn't know they were going to. But as a player, of course, you're experiencing the story. And John and Arley, you guys know from the Curse of Strahd campaign we were in, DM'd by Matt London. I thought he did a great job. The gothic horror vibe was super intense, and somehow every session seemed to end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, he was really good at that.
Yeah, and that to me was a really great story and telling of a story. And so that's something as a player I really enjoyed. And DMing is different. I think I probably like DMing more, but I don't go to bed terrified after those settings because of the cliffhanger and the vibe.
For those of you who don't know, John will do voices.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely have a preference for DMing. And I think that's more so that I'm just someone who's very interested in sort of world building and especially like fantasy worlds and stuff like that. I really like to get into the lore and the history and the, what's going on here, what's going on there, and all that stuff. So DMing is really like a dream come true for me whenever I get to do it. So whenever I'm a player, I can't help but feel like, oh, I wish I was DMing right now. Even though playing has its benefits, I feel like playing is very much like almost when I want to take a break from DMing, and I'm just like, okay, I'm feeling kind of burned out now. I'm just going to be a player for a while, so I can kind of let someone else run the show, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely preference for DMing, and I feel like that might tie into the fact that I also, whenever I write fiction, for example, I'm also always very into the setting and the world. I like to get really detailed into that. And that's also the stuff I like to read as well. So I think it might just be based on my personality.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were speaking, like for me, DMing feels very much like writing. Yeah. What about you, John?
Yeah, well, I definitely like playing more than DMing. And so one other thing that you may or may not know about me is that I am an extremely obsessive person. Like that is just my personality type. I'm going to obsess about the things that I like, which is not really surprising as a geek, but I take it to like a ridiculous level. So like even as a player, like I can find ways to just like spend all day screwing around with a character build or whatever. Like doesn't matter. I'm not even gonna play it right now. I don't know if I'm ever gonna play it, but I can spend all day doing that. I can spend all day, making level up decisions about a character that I actually am playing. So DMing is not great for that. Because you could basically just keep doing it all the time forever. So I'm going to experiment with bringing it back into my life on a sort of more irregular basis rather than like a regular game, to fill in gaps when I have cancellations of my regular groups. But I'm going to use adventures that I edited for Kobold. So it's like, okay, I've already done extensive thinking about these adventures, so it's like so it's like doing the best prep that you could ever do for a session, because it's like, okay, I've already broken these down to the bones and then like rebuilt them. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to trying that, but I've already noticed, like, even though I'm trying to put a lid on it, it's like, okay, I'm already getting a little ridiculous here, because I also play all online, so I'm using virtual tabletops and everything, and it's like, again, that just adds fuel to that fire, because it's like, oh well, gotta make a cool map for this. So okay, gotta open up Dungeon Draft. It'll only take me a few minutes. Oh, then 2 hours later, it's like, oh yeah, finally I'm done. And I gotta find the right awesome art for this NPC. This NPC is important. I gotta go find something to illustrate this person. And so it's not really that compatible with me, but but yeah, I definitely love playing more. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Nice. So D&D has been around for a long time. I discovered it when I was a kid, when I was 13 or something like that, a long time ago. And yet, here we are talking about it. It's popular. They have a new website.
Yeah.
They're doing their thing again where they make tons of modules and you have to buy everything, and they make buckets and buckets of money. So what do you guys think it is about D&Z that people keep coming back to, that we keep coming back to, that makes it a sustainable thing over decades, and that new people, even now, new people start playing it, or like some of us have been playing it for decades? What is it about D&D? Why?
I think it's the interaction. I think it's interaction with other people, and you can create something that is bigger than the sum of the parts. Like we've said, if the group mechanics are good, if folks are the same style of player, if the DM is good, if the type of modular adventure you're doing is the thing that everybody prefers to do, whether dungeon crawl or more character based or whatever. And I thought Lawrence's band analogy was great. I'm a musician myself. I've been in some bands that were an utter chore to deal with and that didn't work. But the best ones, what you end up creating is greater than the sum of the parts, and that's awesome. You get interaction, you learn from other people, you have fun, all of those things all at the same time.
Yeah, I think what Scott's saying is right. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And then as far as D&D in particular, though, because like what he's saying, like that could apply to any role playing game basically. But as far as D&D in particular, I think one of the huge things that makes it sort of be the thing at the sort of the forefront of the role playing games space is that it's just because it's been around for so long, and it's very difficult sometimes to find people who all know the rules of the same game. And so if you're putting together a group, it's like the chances of people all knowing how to play D&D is way higher than everybody knowing how to play some other role-playing game. And so it depends, like, do you have people who like learning the new rules, the rules to a new game, or not? Because I mean, that's a high barrier of entry for a lot of people, especially for role-playing games. I mean, admittedly, D&D has a really high barrier of entry. It's very complicated to learn if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But given that so many people already do know it very well, it's a lot easier to jump into a game like that. Whereas like I was playing some other games recently, and it was like, and nobody really knew the rules super well. It was all kind of new to all of us, and it was a lot of floundering around, like where it all felt like the rules were getting in the way almost all the time. Because, and I think it was largely because none of us were super familiar with it. But so I mean, I think that's one of the factors where it's just the ubiquity of D&D makes it, it's like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy of, like, to answer your question, it's like, oh well, it's just because it's D&D, that's why.
Nice. What do you guys think? You have a different take? You agree? You disagree?
I have a little bit different take, but that's because I came at D&D from a different perspective from the first place. Because I grew up in church circles, really conservative evangelical churches is like literally where I grew up in, and during the 80s. And so, I'm sitting in youth group and I'm, then all of a sudden it's like we get all these presentations on the satanic panic, basically. And,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, you got to be aware of not letting your kids play this game, Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, wait, of what is this of which you speak?
Where can I find it?
Right. I just heard dungeons, I heard dragons, I heard wizards, and and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, whoa, this is my language. I didn't even know I spoke. And so that was my introduction to the game. And so, so what draws me back to it? It's that love of all of that stuff. So, I still love magic. In my stories, I'm exploring whole new magic systems, which I guess is the actual fulfillment of their panic, I guess, in one way. And I love dragons and I love monsters and I love the interaction with the mysterious and I love the story that comes along with all of this. And then throw on top of that, I get to do all this with my friends.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got me.
Yeah.
What if Gary Gygax came up with the Satanic Panic to get kids like Maurice interested in D&D? It's
Yeah.
like all these people who are going to rail against it, they're going to do our marketing for us.
Do the marketing, 'cause they did. I had no idea what it was until they panicked about it. So
It's
That's
true.
amazing.
My mom was also a serious churchgoer, and when she found out I was playing D&D, she was like, "That's devil worship," and I was like, "Note to self: don't tell mom about it anymore. Like, just leave her out of it."
They banned it in the public schools down here.
oh wow.
1983 or so, yeah.
Recently or back then?
Oh, 1983. No, not
Oh.
now, but back in the satanic, said
Satanic
wouldn't let us
panic.
play in the schools. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
What do you think,
I
Lawrence?
agree with that. Like, I definitely think that the Satanic Panic era definitely, probably helped with D&D marketing more than it hurt D&D marketing. Just because, I feel like D&D, especially at that time, was probably more targeted towards a teenage audience. Nowadays, I feel like it's targeted towards, a very balanced mix of like teenagers, adults, everyone pretty much. And yeah, when teenagers are told not to do a thing, you know what happens. And I do think that the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons has definitely carried on to the present, partially because of the huge success of fantasy as not just like as a book genre, but as we've got like Lord of the Rings, the movies, and then following that with HBO's Game of Thrones. Those are some of the most like popular movies and shows in recent times, and I think that kind of the popularity of fantasy at this point in time has definitely helped D&D to kind of ground itself in our contemporary lives even further.
Nice. Yeah. For me, it's all about the wealth of material. Like, there's just no other gaming systems with that many cool monsters.
And
it
homebrew
literally
material.
makes me drool.
And homebrew and user supplied material, which I find fascinating. There are a lot of players and folks just like us out there with really interesting, clever mods to modules or their own ideas of classes and stuff. And I find that almost more interesting than the official rules as written stuff.
Yeah. So speaking of classes, what are you guys' favorite classes to play? And what are the classes that like just don't interest you at all? They sound totally boring for you.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say anything is just like on the no list for me. Like I definitely want to play something in every class at some point, and it's like, even though I do have that desire, I still haven't really explored certain classes. Like I haven't played a sorcerer yet. It's like I do want to. It's just that every time a group is coming together, it's like it just doesn't feel like the right moment, because it's like I always like to play a character that's going to fit in with the group, that can fill a niche that somebody else hasn't already grabbed, and I want to be able to support in whatever way, whether it's with not necessarily like a support character, but like how can I support the group in whatever way. But I tend to like marshals, but I also I like a Gish, which is like a marshal slash magic user combined. I don't know where, I can't remember where that term Gish comes from. I had to Google it. I found it from like Reddit or something. I was like, what is that? And I was like, oh, okay. But like I like artificers. They're pretty interesting. I love the vibe of them. Just like of being this like technologically based arcane practitioner, but also like just the mechanics of them is pretty cool. But yeah, so that's where I sort of live a lot of the time as player.
Nice.
See, for me, I tend to default to the rogue class. I think I've played everything now, but I do, left to my own device, I'm going to default to a rogue. Usually a thief or an assassin of some kind, and then I'll create some elaborate backstory for them, which is like part of the real fun for me. Is like, all right, so now, why is this character the way he is? And so elaborate backstory that I then have to give to the DM. By the way, here's my backstory, and he's just like, there are 3 pages here, and I'm like, yes.
I love doing backstory.
Yeah,
I love doing backstory.
Maurice, have you seen that I rewrote the lyric to Baby Got Back to be Baby Got Backstory? And I love a good long backstory. So
okay, all right.
It's on Reddit if anybody wants to see it.
I actually made a note to go look that up just so you know.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't. Like John, I don't have any classes that are like on the on the ban list. I'm open to playing any class. I do feel that, sorry Maurice, but rogues are maybe just not for me. I don't know. I just don't really see the appeal of them.
It's all about the backstory.
I guess so. But yeah, my favorite class to play is often the paladin. And I often like playing paladins because I like to put these sort of like self-imposed restrictions on my character and sort of discovering like, okay, what happens if I break them later on, right? And I often find that kind of creates an interesting tension or conflict in the character right off the bat. And yeah, that's pretty much why I like playing paladin. I also like the mechanical role that they play of being sort of like a tanky martial character that also has like some support abilities as well. So yeah, all around, that's just my favorite.
Nice.
That's funny because that's the one class I can't stand the most. But I turned on it when because one of my oldest friends, and like he's been my friend since like 5th grade, and so when I started doing Dungeons and Dragons, he came along and he started doing it with me, that sort of thing. And he created this one paladin character, which come to find out, my friend loves to design characters just to annoy the DM. And so his paladin character was so righteous, he could not begin any combat without praying first. And not just praying, he had to drop to his knees and pray before any combat situation that he does the righteous thing in this combat interaction. And the best frustrating part about it is because that automatically gives a free hit to the enemy. Right? But because he was praying, it's like there was this weird string of coincidence. Like everyone would always botch when trying to hit him while trying to pray. Wow. And we went on for months, and no one could hit him on that praying swing. It was hilarious.
So it was righteous. But that makes you and Lawrence perfect to play the game together because you want to play different characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, my character in our Strahd campaign was actually Paladin, and I put Strahd back in the ground.
Yeah.
What about you, Scott?
I've played only a handful of the classes in 5th edition. I've played 2 rogues, and I agree with Maurice. I like those, especially at the sort of medium levels, rather than super high levels. I've played a wizard, which I enjoyed. I've played several different war clerics, which I enjoyed. And I think it was kind of, once I understood the mechanics, it felt familiar to me and saved me some work learning. But I think what I really like more is playing different alignments, if I may flip your question on that. My wizard was chaotic neutral, so she was willing to murder a prisoner in order to ingratiate the party to the bad guys. One of my war clerics is lawful evil, and I play him as a zealot.
Mm-hmm.
And he will not heal another party member unless they make a donation to his god, which he gives to the temple. You know, he's not a scammer or anything, but he's so uptight. All other gods are blasphemers, etc. And one of my rogues was a bit neutral evil. He ended up attuning to the hand of Vecna, you know, taking off his So, but it fit his character, and nobody in the party, none of the other players were surprised. It completely worked. So I think next time I'm going to go for lawful good, which is what I actually am as a person, but I've never played that.
Yeah.
But I think it's fascinating to sample those different things, and to me that fits in with the backstory. You know, who is this person, and why is their moral code this particular code, and see where it goes.
Were those characters in evil campaigns, or were they just evil characters in a regular campaign, or
a semi-regular campaign, I guess? I mean, I wouldn't call the campaign completely evil, but the chaotic neutral character was a Princes of the Apocalypse campaign, so we were trying to ingratiate ourselves into those cults. The lawful evil cleric, that campaign is ongoing. The guy who's attuned to the hand of Vecna was in a Baldur's Gate descent into Avernus, so we were in hell. Most of the party was not evil. So my guy, everybody else, hell was kind of dark and the food tasted like ash, and my guy's like, this tastes fine. What do you mean?
Have you guys played campaigns where the characters are all evil, or mostly evil, or anything like that? Like evil campaigns?
I have played in a campaign where we didn't intend to make it an evil campaign, but it kind of went down that road anyway.
I have not, and I don't care for that sort of like I don't want to play, like I respect somebody wanting to do that, especially like Scott saying, he's like, he himself is lawful good, but he wants to role play his other things. Like I don't enjoy that. Like I usually want to play a sort of a good doofus is my default, which is part of the reason why initially in the Strahd campaign I was kind of struggling with my paladin, that was in the same game with Arley and Scott, because it was like I was trying to make him like like a traditional paladin, but I was like I gotta figure out a way to have more fun with him, so that sort of played into that, but like when I did my campaign, like I actually had like in the character guidelines I was like no evil or asshole characters, because it's like you can also make a character who's not evil but is just an asshole, and it's like then that's just like that's almost more annoying than just an evil character, so that's not my jam, but yeah.
I DM'd a campaign once with these two guys, and one of them was playing an asshole character, and he flips a coin to make decisions, and he flipped a coin and killed the other character. And I was like, we're not doing this again.
I guess that was the end of the campaign.
Yep, that's how it happened with us. The one time we tried doing an all evil campaign, turned out the campaign ended up being a one-off. Within a couple hours, we'd killed each other. So.
Yeah.
You have to, like, if you're DMing a campaign like that, you have to figure out a way to motivate the characters to keep each other alive, as well as.
Actually, it turned out to be really good because, like I said, we're playing with a friend group, and apparently a lot of us had issues we needed to vent out about each other versus the group meeting. So it's like, all right, this is a great way to do to vent those frustrations, and sort of we come back together the following week, and suddenly we got along a whole lot better.
Nice.
For me, it's sort of a balance, and I like this zealot who's lawful evil, partly because of the lawful part. If he gives you his word, he will keep it, and he follows the strictures of his religion exactly. So he does live by a code. He's just rather selfish about it. I would not want to play a chaotic evil PC.
Right.
Someone who wants to destroy the world and kill everybody. That wouldn't be fun.
Yeah, lawful evil definitely seems more compatible with anything else than including like neutral evil, which, like, if you like drill into like the ethos of neutral evil, it's like it's like it's almost just as bad as chaotic evil, or maybe, I mean, because it's like it's all about selfishness,
Yeah.
and it's like, so it's like it kind of seems like it's better, like on the surface, because like, oh well, it's partially neutral, so it can't be as bad as chaotic evil, but no, it's pretty terrible.
I feel like lawful evil would be about constantly trying to find loopholes
Hmm.
in your
Yeah.
rules.
But is that lawful? I don't know. And of course, everybody plays these things a little bit differently, and I'm totally fine
Yeah.
with that. And some people, in D&D, the devil monsters are lawful evil, but of course, their willingness to be super evil is much different than my character. He's not murdering people. But I really like the idea of following a code, that he is going to follow the code. He's just super selfish about it. So that particular character would not look for loopholes. Like he would say, okay, the code says this, I have to do it.
Nice. So as people in the industry, creative people, editors, etc., etc., do you feel like D&D and similar games, do you feel like writers can get something out of playing D&D? Is it beneficial to the writing process or the creative process or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think definitely for sure. I mean, because it's like when you actually are role playing as a specific character, I mean, I think that makes you think about how characters make decisions on a different level. Like, I mean, you could do it all you want as just like, making it up in your head, but I mean, like when you're put in that situation and you have to actually interact as the character with other people who are also doing the same thing, it sort of forces you to be in this more intimate headspace of the character. And then, and I may have mentioned this in the previous panel, but when there's also games like Monster of the Week that really push you to create this collaborative story together. Like just the character building tools, just like they ask you all these questions that make you make connections between the characters. And when I was starting up my game with that, or when that game that I'm in was starting up, it's like we made like a story bible for a TV show in the span of like one like session zero, and it was like, and it's awesome. It's like, honestly, it's like we actually talked to each other. We're like, should we be writing a TV show, guys? I mean, so yeah. So I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting tools in role playing games that can fuel this kind of creative output, and arguably they're terrible for art in the world, because a lot of people are putting their effort into making awesome stuff in role-playing games just for their group of 5 people, as opposed to like actually writing a novel or something. So
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that I literally I teach 2 workshops, two creative writing workshops, one on world building and one on characterization. And it's funny how with those 2 areas of specialty, what I end up leading them through half the time is now Dungeons and Dragons training experience, because rolling up a character is a great exercise for a writer. It's like, no, there's the things we think about, when we're coming up with these characters, and those series of, like John was saying, those series of questions we end up asking about the characters. What do they lead to? These fully fleshed out characters that you can now drop into any situation, right? And then same with world building, because and again, I'm thinking through why they loved me, running being the DM, and part of it was I loved world building. So even if you gave me a module, I would always look at the module and go, not good enough. And I always build it out more, and create these elaborate, even more elaborate things, because I just love world building so much. And then come to find out that skill set, transfers over sometimes to my detriment, because I do probably as much world building for a short story as I do a novel.
Right.
Take that for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think for writers, it's definitely helpful. I mean, I've going back decades, used alignment as a character building tool for characters in my fiction, as a shorthand for moral code. But one thing I really like about a lot of the 5th edition D&D materials is they are starting to acknowledge or point out that NPCs have motivations, and that characters should as well. There'll be a little sidebar. What do they want? And that, to me, of course, is the key. For actors and role playing, but also for writers, the character needs to want something, and then for me, the moral code is sort of what decides how they choose to get it. What are they willing to do to get what they want, and what are they not willing to do? So yeah, I think that's great, not only for character, and then they write the long backstory like Maurice and John were mentioning, and then place them in a situation like Maurice and John were mentioning, and then what the character does in that situation based on what they want, what the moral code is, of course, is plot. And then the story unfolds. So I think it could be very useful for those character things, and also for creating character-based, character-centered stories where the character's actions are really designed to make the plot happen, and the plot to focus around the character pursuing their goal and making choices.
Nice.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everyone has said so far. But I'd like to add that I do think D&D is very beneficial for writers, especially when you're taking on a DM position, because sometimes the players just do things you'd never expect, right? And oftentimes, when you're alone writing a story, you've only got your own mind to work with, and you kind of know how things will turn out as you're writing the story. Sometimes, but sometimes through that experience with D&D, encountering ideas that your players just throw at you out of nowhere, it can make you go back and think like, okay, what if that happened in this story I'm working on, instead of the sort of mundane thing that I was thinking that was going to happen. Like, what if one of the kind of famous incidents was when my players were in a desert and they encountered some centaurs that were hostile towards them, and they what they ended up doing was, they, instead of just directly fighting them, they kind of made a lasso out of rope and used it to kind of tie up the centaur's legs and kind of trip him over, and that caused a sort of a domino effect of others falling over him and stuff like that. And it was just something I didn't expect would happen. But it was way more exciting than just kind of a standard okay, I hit you, you hit me kind of combat. And it's definitely something that made me kind of think that being forced into these situations as a DM, it really makes me want to try to think more outside the box when I'm having these sorts of conflicts in my own writing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because especially for newer writers, so often they're writing these storylines that are not as inventive or creative as they think they are, and and that's a really good point, because every time I DM, somebody does something that I did not expect. So bringing that believable but unexpected element into a story is a really good idea. Yeah.
That said, I feel like all of us as editors, we're actually basically as prepared as any DM could be for those unexpected things. It's because we've thought about story so extensively, and we understand the beats and how stories go, and so I think we have a better chance of sort of predicting what the PCs will do. Once you get to know who they are as players. That said, they're still going to surprise us.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think that's something too kind of related, is the way that we read or the way that we understand or think about story is very different from the way that the average person thinks about story. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about when you guys first started playing D&D. Was it easy for you to get into? Was it hard for you to get into? Did it take a couple times? Was it love at first sight? And what were the things that made that experience that way?
Well, for me, I've had this lifelong, experience with D&D. Like I can remember at 8 years old, I wasn't playing, but it got played in my house for the first time. And of course, and I think I had seen it in ET like years before that or whatever. So, but I don't know that it registered on me. And it was only in retrospect that I was like, oh, like my sister was playing D&D in our kitchen that one time. And like, so I had gotten into like all kinds of different role-playing games and stuff, like on computer games and stuff. But you know, it wasn't until I was like 13 that I actually ended up playing D&D. And so I started playing, and it was like it was a little bit difficult because I didn't really have like people who knew the rules that could play with me and everything. And I should also add that, like, so there was that moment where I saw D&D played, and then my stepdad had a group that played. So like when I was like from ages like 10 through 11 or 10 to 12, like there was a game like in my house, like, you know, regularly. And so
Wow.
I'd be watching it, and I'd be like curious about it, but like, you know, they wouldn't let me play because they were all adults and I was a little kid. And then so I think my initial real experience is playing when it was like, it wasn't just like me and two friends who didn't know what we were doing. Like I actually did eventually get into my stepdad's game, but everybody was terrible to me in the game. Basically, like the DM, who was my stepdad, and he was a terrible person. But anyway, he was also a terrible DM. But everybody in the game was just like mean to me because I was a kid. I was like, well, I mean, come on. Like, but anyway, it's kind of amazing that I actually do love any of this stuff, because it's like I had so many bad experiences with it growing up.
Wow.
But yeah, it was eventually like my sister got married, and her husband ended up running some games for us, and that's when I felt like that's when I really began playing D&D, which was when I was like, I don't know, 15 or something like that. And then so I was in games for like, you know, just for years and years after that. I did have a dark time when I moved away to college, and so I left my group, and then I didn't play for like 10 years, just because like
Wow.
I'm an awkward nerd, and you know, couldn't find a new group. But yeah, and then when I married Christy, she was in a game, and that's how I actually got back into D&D, because it's like she was in this game, and so I got brought into that. And thank goodness.
That's so weird, because college is where I played the most D&D.
Right. I mean, that's the truth. That's true for a lot of people. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause
cool.
when I first started, it was in middle school. You know, because like I said, Satanic Panic, and we're on youth group, and so we're all intrigued by this game, but like no one actually wanted to read the rules because it came with a book, and like we weren't trying to do all that, and so, you know, we were making up our own rules and trying to figure it out that way, and so it didn't really work out that well, you know, early on. But like with John, you know, it was in my 20s, college years, or just post college years, fell into a group. I got to see the game really played, and like I said, just fell in with it then, and just fell in love with you know, with both with the group of people I was playing with, and with the game itself. And then and so then and we've been a gaming group for 26 years now.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and we're still together. We've been playing as long as Magic the Gathering has been a thing. So, so like literally generations have gone on now, and so it's neat to see that that each of us have brought like our children into the gaming circles,
Wow.
but mostly with Magic, but with the role playing stuff. There was a couple students of mine. One, ironically, they were kids of my church. My different. Now I'm with a different church, but they were like, "Hey, you know, we'd love to play Dungeons and Dragons, and no one we know plays, but we know you play, Mr. Broaddus." Like, oh, that's true. Yeah, come on, join my gaming group. And we created gaming sessions just to allow the young people to game alongside us.
Wow.
And the best part about it was the other parents coming up jealous, talking about, how come you get to play games with our kids? Because we listen to them and want to play alongside them. It's not that hard. So.
That's cool. It's cool that you have the same group for decades.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, we love it.
That's awesome. What about you guys?
For me, it was the book. I mean, I was 10, and I think I knew some kids who were into it. And so the first thing I bought was the old player's handbook with the big statue on the front, and they're prying
Oh
the
yeah.
gems out. And I don't think we really knew or understood the rules, but I read that book cover to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that stuck with me were some of the history terms. Like that's where I learned what a glaive was, and a
Yeah.
falchion, and a fauchard, and all that. Even some of the sort of formal grammar and footnote and organizing terms. The reading those spell descriptions was the first time I'd really thought about, magic or a magic system. A lot of the monsters were pulled from Western mythology that I was familiar with. A lot of them were pulled from other places that I wasn't as familiar with, which was fascinating. And then for me, as a kid, the most interesting part in that player's handbook, there's about a 3 or 4 page section, maybe 3/4 of the way in, where, as an example of what a session should be like, they actually write almost like a stage play script. A session, DM says this, an example session. And that to me was the most fascinating part, the most engrossing and enjoyable, I think, because it was a story. And the sense of awe and mystery and discovery of what could be out there, I think, was the same thing I was getting from fantasy novels. That all of these fantastical, otherworldly things could exist, and you could go there. But yeah, that was my perspective on it. Until later, I actually found people where we could know how to play, could actually play the game. So to me, it was more an experience before it was a functional game.
An experience with the book.
Experience with the book and other people, and we talk about the books, we design characters, but never actually did a game. We'd loan each other the books so we could read the other books, and like Monster Manual and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I feel about it is like it's almost like D&D found me rather than I found D&D. I remember I was very young in elementary school. I think I was probably around like 7 or 8 years old, around there. As a kid, I was very much obsessed with Greek mythology, Norse mythology, and all that, and all the different gods and monsters and all sorts of things. And I remember we had this sort of like computer typing class where we were learning how to type on a computer. And every, I think, maybe like 15 minutes at the end of the class, the teacher would give us sort of free time to do whatever we want on the computer. So what I did was I was just like searching up the names of these like monsters and gods. And it just so happened that I think I started searching up something about dragons, where I saw on like Google Images the sort of the standard chromatic D&D dragons, like red dragon, blue dragon, all that. I was like, cool, this looks really interesting. But those the images of those dragons were just stuck in my mind for years, so that when I think when I was about like 12 years old or so, I went to a bookstore and I saw the sort of starter box set. I think it was for D&D 3rd edition at the time. And it had the black dragon on the cover, and I instantly recognized that art. So I bought that box set. I didn't even know what D&D was. I just like, hey, I remember I saw this dragon. I thought it was really cool. I like this art. I'm gonna buy this. Looks like some kind of game. Probably will play it, But as a kid, I wasn't very social, so I didn't really have many friends who were interested in playing that kind of thing, and I hardly understood the rules, even though it was a starter box set. So what I ended up doing was I ended up kind of coercing my sister to play it with me, my younger sister. So I think she's like 3 years younger than me, so she must have been around like 9 or something. I think I promised that I would like do her a favor or something if she played this game with me. And yeah, that starter adventure was very much a very basic dungeon crawl with almost like no story to it. But the funny thing was after I sort of ran her through it the first time, I think I was the DM, but I was also playing a character, so it was things were kind of nebulous at that time. We kind of ran that adventure over and over again, and every time I ran it, I would like make small tweaks here and there. I would add more story elements that I felt were missing. I would maybe add more monsters or move monsters around and things like that. And that really kind of, I felt like, were my sort of D&D training wheels, you could say. And yeah, and then after that, I went through a period in like high school, I think, where I didn't touch D&D at all because I was too cool for that. But then, yeah, once I got to college again, then that's where I kind of reignited my love for the game and began to really get into it.
Nice. Wow.
I think just real quick, I mean, I think one of the really cool things about where we are now in the world is it's so much easier to actually get a group together because you don't need to all be in the same place. You don't need to just know people locally that can play, because it's like with virtual tabletops, it's like so easy to find friends from all over the world to join you in a game. And then also there's a service like I think it's called Start Playing, but it's like that has like professional dungeon masters on it and stuff. So like you could actually, like, if you can't find somebody who can dungeon master or who knows how to dungeon master, you could play in one of those games like for a fee, and then maybe that's how you can learn how to play. And some of them are even explicitly designed to be like, hey, this is an introduction to let you learn how to play D&D. And so there's things like that. But just the fact that you can, get on Discord or get on Whereby or something like this, or just use Roll20 and their video chat, you can get a game together. And I mean, I think that's what's made it so vibrant to me in recent years, just because it's like, because I don't have to just find people locally. I can be in a D&D group with all these different writers that I know. And so it's so that's been really awesome.
That's how I joined your campaign.
Yeah.
Was you asked me at that one convention? I forgot, like several years ago. Do you guys feel like it's a D&D and games like that? Do you feel like it's especially good for people who are shy or introverts, because it kind of creates a forum with pretenses for interaction?
I'd say maybe. Because I think it's also sort of an open-ended format for interaction. Are you going to play? How are you going to play the character? How are you going to choose to play the character? And there may be group dynamics things in there where I know, for me, sometimes as a shy person, I have felt less agency, perhaps, in the overall group decisions. So I think it can be a dynamics issue. I definitely think folks who are shy should give it a shot, or should not feel worried off it. But that may be a thing that depends a bit on them and the group.
I never thought of you as shy. I just think of
Yeah.
you as deliberately spoken.
I do that amongst groups that I feel a part of the group dynamic. Yes.
Interesting.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. Is like, if like, even with that example where I said where I allowed some kids from our church to come in, they were shy, they were awkward, those sort of kids. But it was about creating an environment where they felt safe and comfortable to be themselves, to be goofy. And if you can create that sort of container for it, then yeah, it has a lot of potential to do that.
Nice. Any other thoughts on that, or a different take? Or...
Go ahead, Lawrence. You keep going last.
Yeah, I think I pretty much, maybe it's kind of a 50-50 for me. I feel like that for some people who are more shy, the structure does kind of really help a lot when it comes with those kinds of interactions. Because yeah, even though D&D is very open-ended, there is still kind of a structure to it, because you're playing this character and you're allowed to not necessarily be yourself. You can try and pretend to be someone else. But I do feel that I have encountered a few players who have a very difficult time just trying to role play. And these, sometimes they were shy people, sometimes they weren't. It was just the act of role playing which they found difficult. So oftentimes they kind of, the way they played their characters were very much just like they were kind of playing a blank slate almost. And they just kind of performed the mechanical actions of the game, but they didn't really have much interest in role playing, and they didn't really interact very much with other players at the table. Which I think this kind of brings us back to one of your first questions, Arley, was like, is D&D for everyone? And I think there are a few cases where some people just don't really enjoy the act of role playing, and that can be a big hindrance.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we were saying earlier, in terms of like, who is right for D&D and other games like it. I think it just, a lot of it depends on the person. Like, whether, like, if you're an introvert or you're a shy person, depending on other factors of your personality, depends on whether or not, like, it's good for you. But I mean, for me, like, I found like it's helped me immensely, like, in terms of like being more outgoing and I mean, like, people who know me, who like met me at a convention or something, they wouldn't necessarily think that like I have any issue with that. But it's like, that's in my safe space environment. That's where it's like, okay, I know everything about this space, and people want to come talk to me because I'm a professional in this space, and so like I have a lot to talk about, and everybody around me is interested in the same thing that I'm interested in. But like, I go to a party where like I don't know people, and I'm like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I don't know how to talk to these people. But you know, it's actually interesting for me, because it's like, for most of my D&D life, like, I did not role play much at all. Like, I was very much like what Lawrence was just describing, and I felt awkward about it. Like, I would mostly talk in third person. I'd say like, oh well, I say my character says he's going to do this, or whatever, and not even put dialogue in, because it's like, I'm like putting it that way. And then it was really only been in recent years, once I started doing all these virtual games, where I'm talking to people through the computer. It gave me that buffer that made me much more comfortable. And then also I had some players join various games of mine who were much more into the role playing stuff, and like they were doing voices and things. And so I felt like it gave me more of a green light to go ahead and try that stuff myself, because it's like I won't feel as embarrassed because they're already doing this. And so now I got super into it. Like, like Arley, you said, like, I'm doing voices now. And I mean, unfortunately, it's just one more thing to be obsessed about, because it's like, as I'm building a character, it's like, okay, I have to decide what character I'm going to play. I got to decide on all these different factors that go into the mechanics. But now I also added the additional challenges, like, what voice am I going to do though? And it's like, well, I've already done X, Y, and Z. What can I do? I mean, I'm not an actor. Like, there's only so many things I can do. And so, yeah, but it's fun. It's fun. I love it.
Nice. Well, we're about out of time. Any last thoughts before we call it a day?
Could I add a plug?
Yeah.
I'm at Balticon, and I think it's actually 2 weeks from today. I am on a panel about DMing, and I
nice.
think it's advice for new DMs. I'm moderating the panel, so I guess I'm DMing the panel, right? And as it's sort of an entry-level thing with advice on preparing, improvising, going with where the players take you, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So anybody out there who is at Balticon,
drop by. Nice. Excellent. Any other last thoughts? Well, thank you very much, everybody. You had something? Go ahead.
I do. I mean, I just, if you have any thought at all about trying Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game, just try it. Like, try to find somebody that can play it with you, because it's like, really, it's so great. And like, I think, like, you owe it to yourself. If you're even curious about it, you owe it to yourself to at least try it once, because like, it's been a life-changing experience for I mean, at least for me, and maybe the others on the panel, but for lots of people all over the world. And I mean, I think it's just awesome to be able to improvise and collaborate and play games with your friends and tell new stories together, and fight monsters and do good heroic deeds. I mean, like, that's awesome. We need that kind of stuff in the world.
It feels good. Nice. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. Thank you, everyone who watches, for coming to watch. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Maurice, Lawrence, Scott, John, especially Maurice, who is at StokerCon right now and who is exhausted and who, is talked out but agreed to talk a little bit more. Yeah, but it was really great talking to everybody.
Yeah.
Have a good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Arley.